Sometime last year, a friend of mine showed me his GitHub profile, and I was kind of taken back by an animation of a 3D spinning donut made up of a bunch of special characters. So I decided to take a look at the raw README file to see what kind of code he used to put the characters in place and generate the animation. I thought it was going to be similar to what Lex Friedman used in his spinning donut video from a couple of years ago. To my surprise, when I opened the README, it was just a simple link to a GIF image. So I thought to myself, I bet I could make a custom GIF for my GitHub profile in Davinci Resolve. And so I did. And in this video, I'm going to show you how I did it. All right, let's get into it. The first thing you're going to need to do is to create a brand new timeline if you haven't already. So if you go to your settings, make sure that your timeline is set to 1080 by 1080 and it's 30 frames per second. You can also set your entire project settings to this because in this case, I'm just going for a nice small boxy GIF. That's why I'm using this timeline resolution and this frame rate. But if not, you can pretty much use any timeline resolution and frame rate that you want. Now that we have that set, you can drag in a fusion composition right here, and then you can get into it. I have an image that we're going to use here. So I use this image. I'm going to set that. I'm going to show it up here. I'm going to change it to PC just to rename it so I know what it is. And the resolution on my image right now is 736 by 730, but I want, like I said, I want it to be 1080 by 1080p. So I'm going to grab a background and I'm going to put this on top of the background, show the merge. And what I'm going to do, because I don't want blacks to be on the edges, I'm going to hide that. How? I'm going to go through the background. I could scale it up, but I like the size that the PC is at. I'm just simply going to go change the color of the background to match the background of the PC. So we have this nice, seamless looking picture. So the next thing I'm going to do is to add in my text. Now that I got my text here, I'm going to add in a word. I'm going to show it first. And I'm going to add in create. I'm going to increase the size roughly about 0.28. You can be any size that you want, but because I'm anticipating that the text is going to be changing, so I'm trying to pick a size that that works with that based on the words I'm going to use. So roughly around there. I'm going to change the font as well. You can use any font that you want. Poor Richard. I like how that looks, that font. So I'm going to go with that. The next thing I'm going to do, now that we have our text and that we have our image, we can basically take our text and merge it on top of our image, and boom, we have a nice looking image here. But this is not what we're going for. What we're going for is more like that. And in order to get that, we need to add a background color to the text, underneath the text. And that's going to become clear later why we're doing that. So I'm going to create a background and I'm going to put that in. And you can see our text has a background of black, which is what we want. And then we're going to merge that right on top. And what's happening here is this is the text, the foreground, and this is the background, which is the image. And you can toggle that and you can see that's underneath. You can turn off the foreground, it shows the background only. You can turn it back on. Now, why did we need a background on top, a background for the text? Well, it's because of something called blend modes. Every merge node that you see has a blend mode, which basically dictates how the foreground image interacts with the background image to produce a result. And this is a mathematical calculation that happens for each pixel based on the blend mode that you select. In DaVinci, it's called apply modes, and you can see them right over here. And you can see that you're grouped, into certain categories. Some of them are lighten, some of them are dark, some of them are difference, overlay. A lot of stuff's going on there. But what the goal we're trying to achieve is we want to keep our blacks, and we want the white to be transparent. So like I said earlier, the blend mode decides how the foreground interacts with the background to get the output. We have to know what we want in order to choose the best blend mode for our composition. And so in this case, what we want is to keep the blacks and make the white transparent. We want to see through the whites so we can see our PC image. And the blend mode that's going to give us that is in the darkened group. If we go to multiply, and there we go, we get exactly that. We have the blacks kept and everything underneath is transparent. Anything that's black on the foreground is kept, and anything that's white on the foreground image is transparent. You can see white, transparent, black, black, kept. And everything that is in between is a variation. So the closer that color is to white, the more transparent it is. The closer that color is to black, the more, the darker it is, the more it is kept. And so that's what we get. Now we're going to introduce color to our image, to our composition, so we can get a little bit of that variation. And I already have a color that I like over here. You can basically copy the hex code if you want, and but simply by changing that from black to this color, this brownish sort of color, we get this, right? It's darker than the white, and so you can see these zones are closer to dark, whereas here is still kept transparent because it's white. And we're all seeing that on our merge. Basically, by changing the apply mode, we're telling Fusion how these two should interact and what output they should produce, which is basically that. Perfect. Now that we have that, it looks good. It's closer to what we want, but it's kind of dark. So what we're going to do is to increase the brightness. Davinci has a brightness and contrast node. So if you do Control Spacebar, type BRI, and enter, you get that. So I'm going to show that on the second view right there. I'm going to put this on the old one. And so what we're going to do is we're going to up the gain, and voila, where there was darkness, there is now light. You might think that the best option would be to increase the brightness node, but you notice that it gives this sort of hazy sort of look, like a faded look. And that's because the brightness value is additive. It takes whatever value is here and adds it to the individual pixels evenly. And that's why you get this even increase in brightness. The gain value, however, is multiplied. So essentially what it does, whatever value is in the gain, multiplies every single pixel in the image, and you get this sort of effect where the brightest and the mid-level pixels increase, whereas the dark pixels don't increase all that much, which makes sense because if a pixel is dark, it's 0. You multiply 2.264, which is the value you're seeing here, by 0, you get 0. So the dark guys don't increase all that much, but the bright pixels and the mid-level pixels, they increase a lot. So that's why you have that effect. And you can dial this brightness or gain to any amount that you like. So here, 2.7-ish. Looks good. Thereabout. And yeah, that's how you get this. The design is complete. It looks good. If you've made it this far, then great, awesome. But it's not over yet. We need to add a little bit of animation to it. And the animation I want to go for is the sort of typewriter-like effect. In order to do that, what we're simply going to do, so we can go to our text. Oh, I forgot to add a dot here. I think the design just looks slightly better with that little dot. So create. Don't know how you pronounce it any differently with a dot at the end. But there we go. We have a dot. Now, what effect are we going for? We're going for a typewriter-like effect. We want to type out the words and we want to delete them, type a new word, delete them, type a new word, delete them. That's what we're going for. How are we going to achieve that? Well, plain and simple. What we're going to do is this. Let's think about how that actually works. So we're going to write for 30 frames, hold the text so the viewer can see it for 15 frames, and then clear it in the same amount of time, 15 frames, hold the blank frame for 7 frames, and then repeat the process over again. So what we're doing is write, hold, clear, hold. That's pretty much what we're doing. So the viewer can see what's been written, and once it's cleared, they can see it's a blank screen. You don't just start the next animation immediately. It's going to look very abrupt. Let's see how that's going to look. If we go over to the text node over there, you will notice that the text node has a write on value like that. That's how we do the typewriter effect. So we can go the first time, set it to 0. And like I said, we write for 30 frames. And then we write it out 30 frames. As you can see, write for 30 frames. And the next thing we're going to do is hold the text for 15 frames. So the nice thing about Fusion, you can go here, do plus 15. It puts your playhead right there, 45. And then you can put that, and we're holding. Hold the line. Holding. So you write and you hold. And then for the next thing we do after holding, we want to clear. So we can do plus 15. So within 15 frames, we want to clear. So we write. So we write, hold, clear. After that, we hold the blank frame for 7 frames. So we go plus 7, go to the 7th frame. Then we can just add a keyframe there to hold. So what do we have? Write, hold, clear, hold. Write, hold, clear, hold. Write, hold, clear, hold. That's pretty much what we have. Now, we have that for one word. Rather than repeating this pattern over and over again, we can work smarter. We can sort of set this into loop and then change our texts as necessary. So what we're going to do is we're going to loop this animation. So it goes 67 frames. So we can go to the spline view. If you can't see this, essentially, you can set this to show only selected. My text node is currently selected. That's why I can see my text node. And then I can click this to put the graphs into view. If you take a look at the graph, the green represents the write on end, which is what we are moving and animating. The start is pretty much just a flat line because we're not moving that start dial. It's just pretty much the same throughout. So we can pretty much just turn that off because we don't need it. And what we're going to do is we're going to scroll. So hold down Control and then scroll out, and then select that keyframe, all those keyframes. And then we can go to set loop. And automatically what's going to happen is this. Once we play, it writes and rewrites itself. That is black magic for you. That was not funny. Let's keep going. Okay. Now that we have this write and rewrite, what we want to do is we don't want to have create showing up every single time. We of course want to change this, and so we can. So we're gonna go over here. We notice that at the 67th frame is when we've completed one animation loop, and before the next one starts again, we can see our text here. It says create. We can change it at this point to something different. So I'm gonna put a keyframe first at the beginning. So I'm going to go to frame 0. This is very important. So I go to frame 0 and I put a keyframe there to say we're starting with create. And at frame 67, I want to change that. So what you're going to observe is if I play this again, so we see create, and then we see code. Nice. Now, but we don't want to write code over and over again. So of course, at 67 is another loop. So we do plus 67. That is after another loop. What do we want? We can write another word. Design. And then we repeat that. 67 again. And then we can write animation. And so once we play this all together now, we have design, we have animation, boom. And it just loops and loops and loops and loops and loops. which is perfect. So around, if we go to our spline, we can see that around 268, which is this point right here, we've completed an entire loop. We've completed the entire GIF. We can basically, if we want, adjust our timeline to that. So, oh, by the way, you can use this to adjust your timeline ruler. So you can put this here, and you can set the zones that you want to render by holding Control, click. So if you click, it just renders only one frame, which is not useful. But if you hold Control, click and drag, you can basically tell Fusion to loop between those yellow lines. So basically it loops only between those yellow lines. So as you can see, it's going to hit that and start again, just like that. So I'm going to put mine at the beginning and then just put it up here. Mine's already set to 268, but you can set yours to 268 and then drag from beginning to end of the line, and then you get that loop. So since that's what we're going to be pretty much rendering as well, you can pretty much go to the end of your timeline. So I take the playhead to the end of that 268 timeline, and I'm going to press O, and then I'm going to go to the beginning here, and I'm going to press I. And basically the reason I'm doing that is because that's what we're going to be rendering. And once we take a look, go back into Fusion, and we can click this. And we started with just this image, which is 736 by 730, but now we have this. So we started with this image, but now we have this. So what did we do so far? So we have the image, merged, text on top of that with the appropriate multiply blend mode, and we have a brightness node that basically ups the brightness so we can see our composition much more clearly. And that is pretty much it. So in order to get our image actually showing in the editing timeline, we're gonna need our media out, which is right over here. Yours was already connected, mine wasn't. I'm just gonna put that in, and boom, we should have that, and there we go. It's showing right now in our editing timeline. Yay, we've done it. And so we're going to export between those frames. And one thing to know about exporting is, in order to ensure that it stays this resolution, it looks like this when you export, your timeline resolution has to be the same as your export resolution. So remember, if I go to settings here, you can see the timeline is 1080 by 1080, and the video format is the playback or frame rate is 30 frames. So if I go back, I go here, H264. What I can do, I can change my QuickTime to GIF, animated GIF, 1080 by 1080, and I change the resolution to 30 frames. And we can say, change this to Custom GIF for GitHub. And then add to render queue, take this out, and then render all. It renders from start to finish. And I can open that file location, and we can double click, and boom, our beautiful animation is playing. You can pretty much post your GIF anywhere you want, but I'm going to be putting mine on my GitHub profile README. I've downloaded my GitHub profile onto my laptop, and so I'm going to open it up in VS Code, and I'm going to show you what it looks like. Here it is. Essentially, this is my raw README file on the left, and this is my preview or the rendered README on the right. Essentially, this line of syntax from 14 to 16 is responsible for what you see over here. So if I do a Control X, you can see the GIF is gone, and if I do undo, it's back. Essentially what this is just a div HTML semantic element, alignment sent to center, and we have the image, which is the GIF that you see inside the div element. So I set the alignment here to center because I want the div to be centered within the README document. And the image, I have set the source to be asset / GitHub GIF 30 frames per second. which is basically right here in my local repo. And I have the alt attributes set to animate a text in front of computer. If the source is unable to load, it's going to display this text instead. And I've set the styling for the image to be a display of block, margin inline of auto, so the image is centered within the div itself. And I set the width to 800 pixels. I know we rendered at 1080p, but I felt 800 pixels was a good size to render it on GitHub. And there you have it. That is it. And if I head over to GitHub, that is what it looks like on GitHub. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, sure to hit the like button or check out some other videos if you're interested, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace.